Hello, and welcome back to the DeLorean 5510 restoration. You can see that the car is sitting here on its own wheels, and it is actually drivable, which is amazing. I'll just put the fascia on there. So let's go over all the things that are now working on the car. So the first thing I did was obviously the body is now dropped onto the frame, and not all of the body bolts are in place. Some of them just have a little bit they're just a little bit off by like an eighth of an inch that I need to, I don't know, just sort of play around with, I think. Specifically that bolt over there just has a hair that I need to move it over before it'll smoothly go in. So I'll probably, I don't know, wedge something in between the sides of the car to make it stretch out the tub a little bit. Like it's maybe an eighth of an inch off at most. And then there's also the two on the cross member, which you can't really see at the moment, under this thing. So these are not in. And those are also just off by a little bit. I was hoping that once I put the body bolts in these guys there, that it would kind of, adjust everything automatically and kind of make it work, but it didn't quite line up. So I'll have to do a little bit of fiddling with that as well. But for the most part, it's on. The back two body bolts are on. The front body bolt is on. And then 4 of the body bolts on the inside, the one that goes to the seatbelt. So let me go ahead and open this. The one that goes to the seatbelt on either side is on, and the one behind that is on. The ones up front are not, and that is because on the DPI frame, they're adjustable, and I just need to get them in the right spot, because they're not. So after I dropped the body, I hooked up the wiring back here. All these, they're called church connectors or bulkhead connectors, and there's some other wiring things over there. And pretty much everything went on no problem. I did clean them with some electrical contact cleaner that I've got somewhere. Anyway, I just blasted them with that a bunch, both the bulkhead side and the connector side, just to make sure that they were mostly clean, and that worked great. And then the wiring, which of course you cannot see here, but that goes to the alternator and starter and all that kind of stuff, that got installed. And then I basically just started trying to start the car, and I got pretty much nowhere. When I tried to start it, the engine would just kind of like, all the lights on the dash would go off. And yeah, so when I did that, like, it was clearly there was a ground issue going on, or 12 volt issue. So I took all of the main 12 volt lines. So basically the 12 volt line comes out of here. It goes through this, which is a disconnect, a battery disconnect lever. And so I went from here to here, where it connects in the starter, and then it connects from the starter to the alternator, and then it connects from the alternator back to the bulkhead. These brown wires here. Can you see those brown wires under there? So those brown wires connect up to the bulkhead. You can't quite see it down there, but it's basically right there. And so all of those connectors, I took them off. I cleaned them up with a grinder and a wire wheel, a small wire wheel on like the Dremel. And then I did the same thing for the ground lines. So the ground wire comes out of the battery. It connects to the frame. And then there is... which one is it? There's a black wire right here, and it connects, again, it's hard to see here, but it connects from the frame here up to the bulkhead there. So I also cleaned that and did the same thing there. I also did it up to the front of the car. So for all the headlights and stuff and horns, there is a ground wire that's basically on the frame there. So I cleaned that one up as well. And then when I went to start the car, it would keep the lights on, except for the ones that are intentionally going off, which I didn't know about this. But basically, the accessory lights turn off. So your stereo turns off, that little clock right there turns off, your AC stuff turns off, all that turns off when you try to start the car, by design. But the other stuff would stay on. I was able to turn the lights on at that point. Headlights work, brights work. Everything was working great as far as that was concerned. But it still would not try to start the starter. There was no sound at all coming from the starter. And so then I started putting test leads on. So for me, I'm great with electronics. I've been doing electronics and software for a very, very long time. The first PCB I ever built, I was 12 years old, and I built it was called a CCD cookbook. And you literally build a digital camera, and I was 12. So this was in 1995 or 6 when I built this camera. So very competent with electronics. So now that it was an electronic issue, I was very happy to work with it. And so let me see if I can remember which one it is. I think it's this one, if my memory serves me correctly. So this here is the starter relay. And that relay basically fires when you hit the switch on the key. So you turn the key and it switches this relay. That relay has a high current going through it, which then goes back to the starter. The starter has a solenoid on it, which is basically a bigger relay, and it fires that, and that's what starts the car. So that wasn't happening, and so I came back here and I put a test light on that relay on the side that should be firing, and I hit the key and it was firing. And so I'm like, okay, that's great. Why is it not actually doing anything? So I put a probe on the output of the relay, tried to start it, and found out that it was not firing. And so I swapped that relay with the one next to it, which controls some stuff up front, I believe. And again, it didn't work. And so I tested the relay outside. I just pulled the relay, tested it. Relay works. So then I looked at the diagram. I had someone very helpful on the DeLorean technical help Facebook group. And they said, hey, yeah, go look at this particular document in the DeLorean group. And so I did. And it had the full electrical diagram of actually all the systems in the car, but specifically this one. And I found that the ground side was also switched. And so I was just checking the positive side. And so once I found that out, it was switched by the shifter. So basically, the car can only be started if you are in neutral or park. And I was in park, and it wouldn't go, right? So what I ended up doing was I put the car in neutral, and then I started the car, and pretty much instantly, it came to life. It was incredible. Like the first time it went, and then it kind of stopped. And the second time it kind of ran for like 10, 15 seconds, and then it stopped. And the third time, as soon as it kicked over, it just ran, and it was great. So yeah, so that was basically the entire, root of the issue there, was that it was not detecting that I was in park. And that was actually super simple. For whatever reason, the first time I adjusted the gear shifter, it just didn't. I just didn't do it right, apparently, because it was off by like one full turn. And so I now have the shifter in its place, and it works, and you can go through all the gears, and it shifts appropriately. Yeah, so that entire issue is fixed. You can now start in park, as one would expect. Once the car was starting, and I kind of did this backwards. I probably should have done the brakes and stuff first before starting the car, but I really wanted the car to be able to start. So you can see I've plugged in the battery now, and so the headlights come on. And this is like a three-way kind of a push knob here. So if you hit this button, if I can show you that. And so you hit that button, and that's what controls whether your parking lights are on, your headlights, that kind of thing. Okay, so yeah, so once the car was starting, I did the brakes. I had my wife come down, and she helped me bleed the brakes. I also used like a a one-man bleeder kit, and that worked for the most part, but I couldn't actually see when the bubbles were coming out because the brakes are completely empty. So it was nice to have a helper anyway. That was easy. It was like such a simple thing. Got it done. Brakes are working great. I've tested each one of them, so you hit the brake, it actually slows down and stop. Parking brake. Those were relatively straightforward. The parking lever is... I'll just go over here. Parking lever there. It basically has two, like, if you've ever had a bicycle and it has a little wire when you pull the brakes, same system here, except behind here is a parking brake caliper on either side. So you pull the parking brake handle and it closes those calipers. That's tested and working fine on the driver's side. I actually found out on the passenger side that wire is locked up. And so you pull that handle and nothing happens. You can't, from the caliper, can't pull it or push it either. So it must have some corrosion in that I'll have to fix up before, being able to rely on that. Steering. Yeah, steering is next up on the list. So this was actually a giant pain in the ass, much more than I expected. So the issue that I was running into is that, so let's see here. Yeah, it's pretty dark under there. So the idea here is that the steering wheel has like a rod that goes down, through it, and then out into like the underside of the body, and then from there it connects to that stainless steel, cool-looking knob thing that I had, the lower steering column. So that's all been replaced from that point down. So what was happening is that there's also an outer kind of cage that rod goes through. And I didn't know that this was possible, but that cage can kind of move up and down slightly. And so the rod, as it was, had creeped back up through the cage. So when I put the steering column in place, nothing came out. So there was no threads to to be able to connect to. So I ended up having to completely remove the steering column. And at the same time, I did replace the bushing, because I did have that bushing there, and it's all lubed up now. So the steering wheel doesn't have any more movement at the bottom. It still has a little bit of movement at the top. I'm not sure if you can tell, but it's not that bad. And so I basically pulled it out, pulled the inner rod through into the cage, so it came out in the right spot, and then was able to get it through and connect it to the lower steering column. While it was all facing straight. And so you can see here, steering is straight, the wheels are straight, and when I drove it around the block, it was driving straight. I can move the steering. You have no idea how freaking awesome this is. Previously, with the car, before I had replaced all this stuff, it was impossible for me to move it while it was sitting. The steering was so hard to turn, it just wouldn't go. And now you can see that I'm able to fairly easily move it. I mean, and this is obviously a garage floor that's fairly smooth, but like I can move this really without too much effort, even without power steering. I don't know exactly what changed to make that do that, but obviously I have a brand new steering rack. I have a brand new lower steering column. I have a new bushing, and I also aired up the tires. The tires were pretty low, so all that helped. Oh, I'm so happy about that. The steering, driving it around, 100 times better. So let's see what else is on there. The throttle, yeah, throttle cable. This is one that's going to take a little bit of work. All right, so we're back here at the back of the car. Here is the throttle spool, I believe this is what this is called. And let me see if I can get low down here. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, yeah, you can see it right there. Okay, so this cable here, this cable takes you from the spool to the transmission. So that one's hooked up here as it should be. Everything's great. So yeah, so when you move the spool, this cable here is pulling on the transmission, and so the transmission knows basically how much accelerator pedal you're giving it. Back here, can you see that that's dangling? Yeah, so there's supposed to be a similar thing like this on that, and there's not. And as far as I know, that is not something that I lost. I just don't think it had it on there. And so that sucks. So what? So I have one of those on order now, but it still works. So when you hit the gas pedal, it pulls this, and this all works, and the throttle works, so you can hit the gas. That's obviously an important thing to do in a car, even to be able to drive it around the block. Coilovers, yeah. So all this suspension is brand new, right? So these are coilover suspension and adjustable. And if I may say so, it looks pretty good. I think I may lower it a little bit in the front, but I think the rears are good. And honestly, this is pretty close to what I think the car, stock should have. So it doesn't look bad. It looks good. It's actually super low. It's crazy just how low this car is. From this point over here, it's barely above. Well, no, it's below my rib cage. This part of the car is. Yeah, so low. Coilovers, suspension components. I wasn't able, obviously, before having the body on the frame, to put the suspension components in place. They are in place now. So I had lifted the car up and put it on blocks, and while it was on blocks, so all of the weight is on the blocks rather than on jack stands or anything like that, I was able to crawl into the car and torque everything down as best I could. A lot of it's kind of difficult to get a torque wrench down into there, especially some of them have torque ratings of 60 pound-feet of torque, and that's kind of hard to get on a small torque wrench while crawling under the car without a lot of space. So I think I'm going to have Toby at DeLorean Service Northwest just kind of tighten those up and make sure I got them all as good as I could. Fans and horns. Yeah, fans and horns are the last thing on my list, and those are up front. You know what? I actually have not tested them. And truth be told, I am not sure I know where the horn is. I've never hit the horn in this car. So let's find out. So we got here, probably accessory needs to be on. Okay. I think horn is pressing in. Oh, that is weak. That is the most piddly excuse for a horn I think I've ever heard. So I think I've only got one of the horns hooked up then, because that sounded only like the high notes and not the low notes. So I'll go double check the wiring there to make sure that I did get that. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I may not have gotten the ground for that horn on that side totally hooked up. But yeah, so we can take a look here. Close the door. And no, the door does not sound great. It really does have a funk to it. There's my window. And then the other window up there works. It actually comes off the track, though, when you have the car, or when you have the door up like that. It is outrageously dirty, especially on the outside. Inside's not too bad, but it could really use a cleaning. You can see how much dust and crap is on the windshield. Yeah, we're getting there. This is getting really, really close. So the next thing up on the list is the back of the car. Turn this off. By the way, how many other DeLorean owners smash their head on the door just all the time? I swear, every time I'm working on the suspension or something, and then I stand up and I just whack myself right on this. So the next thing on the list is the rear fascia. I just tossed it up here and put like these bolts here in just loosely. And so that's going to be the next thing. I need to get behind here is the antenna, and I think it was installed incorrectly because when I took off the fascia, that fell in there. So I don't think it was in the right spot or something. But anyway, I'll look into it. Once that's in place down there, then I can get the bumper on. Then I can get the bumper lights and license plate and that other stuff. And I think at that point, like, it's really getting pretty close to be able to take a longer drive than just around the street. Obviously, it's hard to drive around the street, or more than that, without tail lights, brake lights, blinkers, you know. Yeah, so... yeah, sorry for the very long video. There's been a lot going on. I actually haven't worked on the car for the last few days because we've been moving, but now that we're kind of situated there, over the course of the next week, or probably even a few days, I think all these final things are going to be finalized, and yeah, might be taking this on a trip to Ellensburg, Washington, about 120 miles away or something like that. So yeah, back on the road. Thanks for watching. Please leave a comment below. I'll see you next time.